What's up, y'all? Your boy Killer Cam here. It's 6-speed time. 6-speed transmission finally showed up. Shout out to Jose Beltry for staying on FedEx's case and calling them every day until they produced a transmission. I finally got it last week. It showed up. So I guess we're gonna get the ball rolling. I still don't have the mount kit, but I got in contact with the fabricator, and it looks like he moved to a different state. So he's in the process of just getting everything in order on his end so he can ship everything out. Shout out to Daniel Soriano, stand-up guy. But yeah, we're gonna be 6-speed swapping my B13 SER. I have never done this before, but I think it's going to be a learning experience. I'm pretty mechanically inclined, and stuff like this does not really scare me. So hopefully I can learn something in the process, and I'll take you guys along on that ride with me. So hopefully that you can learn something as well, and we'll learn from each other. So let's get into it.
Shit, you fucking crazy.
Alright, so we got two transmissions here, and what we're going to do right here is we're going to make one transmission out of two. To do the 6-speed swap in a B13, you need both of these transmissions. You have a QR25DE 6-speed transmission. This one came out of an 06 Spec V. And then you have a JDM P12 SR20 VE 6-speed transmission. Now the reason why you have to do this and put parts together from both is because the P12 transmission, although it is 6-speed, the gearing is better for all motor. It's kind of set up for NA, and it's like a close ratio. That's where this guy comes into play. The 06 Spec V transmission. The gearing is better suited for boosted applications, and I think it has a better final drive than the P12, the JDM P12. So basically what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be taking the gear stacks and differential out of the QR25 transmission. We're going to be transferring that over into the JDM P12 transmission. Should be pretty straightforward.
Okay, so basically what we're doing here is we're going to remove basically anything that is attached to the exterior of the transmission. So the motor mount bracket has to go. You got a bunch of 14mm bolts all around the base of the cover. You have to take off all of those. Basically anything holding the cover to the bell housing you want to take off, so that you can access the inside. There's going to be a couple brackets in the way. Those are 10mm. You can just undo those with a 10mm socket. Shifter bracket, got to take that off too. It's two 12mm sockets, two 12mm bolts, I'm sorry. Take that off with a 12mm socket. your sensor pigtails. If your transmission came with any pigtails, you take those off. This 24 millimeter bolt has to come out. I don't know what this is for. It has something to do with the gear selector. It's almost like a stop. It stops it from going too far, I guess. Yeah, take that out. It's right underneath the neutral switch there. Then you can take out the neutral switch. Mine was already loose, so I just unscrew it by hand. Up next, that would be the gear selector, check balls, and spring. 14 millimeter bolts. Loosen those, and it should be a spring and ball in each hole. There's a spring, and this is not too crucial actually. Both springs are the exact same size, and the check balls are also the exact same size, so you can't get these mixed up, so don't worry about that. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. This is the gear selector stopper. It's basically a bolt slash pin that stops the shifter from going too far in either direction. And now we're going to take off the actual gear selector assembly. There's 4 10 millimeter bolts. You might have to move the lever there to get to 1 or 2 of them. And after you do that, it should slide right out, like so. Can't forget about the reverse switch. That's a 21 millimeter. Just knock that off real quick. At the top of the transmission, there is this black cap that you have to take off, and when you do eventually get it off, you will find a snap ring underneath. This snap ring holds the one of the gear stacks actually to the cover of the transmission, so you basically have to take the ears and spread them apart, and when you do that, the gear stack should fall out of the or fall down about maybe not even a 1/4 inch, maybe 1/8 of an inch. When you undo the snap ring, it'll fall and disengage from the cover. And then after you do that, just pull up on it and maybe twist a little bit, and the cover should come off. Keep in mind that these are held together with RTV, so you're gonna have to break that seal somehow. I usually use a flathead. Just stick it in between the case and the bell housing and pry on it a little bit, pry up on it. It should let go. And once you do all that, the cover should come right off. Just pull up on it like so, and there's the goods. So here we're going to remove all the roll pins on all of the gear stack shafts, and this will allow you later on to remove them out of the bell housing. There's really no other way around this. You have to remove the roll pins. There's no other way to get them out, to get the gear stack rods out. There's no other way. So it might take some persuading, but a good punch set should knock this right out, no problem. Good punch set and a 5-pound sledgehammer. Give it a couple taps and should knock the roll pins right out, no problem. And there you can see the roll pin. You got two 12mm bolts right here, and this is, I don't even know what this is called. I'm just gonna call it a reverse seesaw. That's what it looks like. Undo the 2 bolts, and that one pulls right up and out. There's 2 little dowel pins that hold it in place. Now this little seesaw teeter-totter thing, when you take it out, you got to keep in mind that there is an aluminum shim that goes on the right hand side for the reverse gear cuff. When you pull that out of the bell housing, that little shim is going to fall out onto the ground, and you can see it there. It's very similar to like a 32 series or 70 series transmission with the forks at the bottom of the forks with the gear selector at the bottom of the transmission. It's basically the same idea here. That's what's going on. So yeah, we're disassembling the trans so that we can get all the gear stacks out and swap them over. There is a hex at the front of the bell housing that you have to take off. There's going to be a bunch of springs and balls and spacer rods in there that you're going to have to take out. That's the first one. That's a spring. And you got to keep this orientation memorized. It's got to go back exactly how you pulled it out. You have a rod that comes after the spring, and it should be a check ball next. So the idea of this is with the springs and check balls, it's like you can only go so far until you get to a shaft, and then you have to remove the shaft, and then you have to pull more check balls out, and then you pull that shaft, and then you have to pull more check balls out. It's very interesting design. I've never seen anything like this before. A little magnet comes in real handy for pulling these check balls and springs and rods out of these crevices here. This particular magnet you could find at Advanced Auto Parts. I think it was like $6 or something, $6 or $7. Small rods, this is very important. The small rods, they go into the gear stack rod at the bottom. There's a provision for them to slide in and out. It's very important that those small little peel type rods end up in the right place. They belong at the bottom of the gear stack rod. Alright, so now we're at the top of the bell housing, and we're doing the same thing. We're removing that top bolt. There's going to be a spring followed by a rod and then check balls after that. Right here, we're removing the C clips or circlips, whatever you want to call them. These particular clips, they hold in place the shifter forks or the selector forks. That's what attaches it to the shaft. Some are held on with roll pins, others are held on with the C clips. And as you can see here, the punch came in real handy with removing the rods out of the bell housing. Once you get it up far enough, the selector is going to fall off of the shaft. And you just keep on wiggling it, it's going to come out eventually. And what I like to do is I'll pull that rod out of the bell housing, and everything that was attached to the rod, I will place it back on the rod so that I know exactly how it goes back when it's time to put everything back together. And every time you remove a rod out of the bell housing, you're going to have to send a magnet into this hole here to retrieve the check ball for said rod that you just pulled out. Got some more C clips to remove on this shaft. Those really are a pain to get off. You definitely want to wear eye protection when you're removing those, because they do like to take flight. Okay, once you got that removed, you can set that aside and you can remove the gear cuff afterwards, and that'll just slide right off. No resistance, just in and out. Again, you have to go back in with your magnet and retrieve. There you go, rods. Yep. You're just going to continue that process until you have all of the gear stack rods out of the transmission. Now the reverse gear stack, or whatever you want to call that, it doesn't have any check balls. It is just a shaft that is in the base of the transmission. Right here, we're removing the gear stacks. It really helps if you have a friend close by that can help with the reverse gear so that it does not fall apart as you're pulling the gear stacks out. And there you have the gear stacks removed, and the differential is the last piece to the puzzle. P12 open diff. What the hell was Nissan thinking? So now we're going to put in the helical LSD from the Spec V. Take your reverse gear setup there and just lay it on top of the bell housing, because everything is going to have to kind of mesh together in order for it to seat properly. So you take your gear stacks, you set them in there loosely, and you're going to grab your reverse gear and kind of wedge it right up next to the two gear stacks, and you just spin it and wiggle it a little bit, and eventually it's going to fall into place. Always clean your magnet. Don't forget to clean your magnet. get any shavings or anything out of the transmission. It's very important, these balls and springs and rods, it's very important that you notate how they came out. They have to go back in exactly as they were pulled out. And again, the small rods have to go into the bottom of the gear stack rods in this little provision here. You definitely want to do that before trying to put them back into the bell housing. And here we are, we're just putting everything back together, reinstalling all the roll pins and C-clips and what have you, trying to get all of the gear stack rods back in place and get the shifter forks aligned there. Honestly, on a scale of 1 to 10, as far as difficulty goes, I would say this is probably 6.5, 7 out of 10 difficulty level. This was a true test of faith right here, and I'm actually pretty good at this kind of stuff. All of the check balls and springs and rods, they have to go back in the exact order that they were pulled out. So just be conscious of that. And if you do install them in the wrong order, it could have adverse effects. And just as you pull the balls and springs and rods out, after you install each gear shaft, gear stack rod, you're going to have to insert another check ball, or, you know, after each one. If you've done it right, then it's going to look like this. And then here we are lastly with the teeter-totter thing again. Reinstalled. Make sure that that tooth is in the crevice there. And on the other side, you can't see it in the picture, the aluminum shim has to go to the gear cuff for reverse. Here we're cleaning the surface. We're cleaning the RTV off of the transmission surfaces so we can seal it back up. For something like this, I only use Permatex Ultra Gray. That's what most OEM manufacturers recommend, so that's what I stick with. And you're gonna install the cover back onto the transmission. Now that top snap ring at the top of the transmission, the one that's underneath the little black cap, is very, very tricky. You basically have to put the cover down as far down as you can get it, hammering down on the dowel pins, like around the flange area, until the cover gets low enough where the snap ring can basically grab the gear from the inside. The same one that when you took it apart, the gear dropped about 1/8 of an inch. Well, you have to pick it up 1/8 of an inch so the snap ring will snap. Here I'm just tightening the cover and reinstalling the shift selector check balls and springs. Now these are very simple. You can't get these mixed up. They only go in one way. There is a ball first and then a spring second for both of these. And then you got two 14mm bolts that you tighten down afterwards. You got your gear selector stopper right there. Tighten that down, make sure that's tight. And then there you have it, all sealed up and ready to go. Be sure to play with the shift selector to make sure that all the gears are there. You definitely want to do that before. Alright, so that was part one. How to swap the gear stacks and differential in your P12 transmission for better gearing for boosted applications. This will be a multi-part series, so there's going to be numerous videos until I get the job done and you guys fully understand what it completely entails to 6-speed swap your B13, B14, B15, whatever might have you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, share, all that jazz. And I'll catch you guys on the next one, man. And don't forget, it's always peace, power, and positivity. Y'all stay up.